All right, everybody, let's talk about common sense. Probably hear that phrase a lot, but this is actually referring to the title of a pamphlet or a small book that was written and published in January of 1776 that's going to convince a lot of people in the colonies to support the efforts for a movement for independence against Britain. So if you think about the reading that you did yesterday, it talks about the people that were on the fence, the people that were loyalists and the patriots. This is to convince the loyalists or those on the fence that they're looking at it the wrong way and they need to support the patriots' cause. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at really how to summarize the four big parts of this document, because there are four parts of this, and rather than read all 60 pages of it, we're going to kind of make sure you understand that this is something that was very influential, very important in the colonies. And a lot of modern teachers or historians like to call this the book of duh, meaning, of course, this is the only alternative. By this point, what are the colonists waiting for? Then simply independence. So let's take a look here. Okay. In January 1776, the American colonists were in open rebellion against Britain, yet few dared voice what most knew was true. Colonists were no longer fighting for their rights as British subjects, they were fighting for independence. So some of these rights as British subjects would be, for example, like not being taxed without your permission. Okay, one we've talked about numerous times in class. It took a hard jolt to move Americans from professed loyalty to declared rebellion. That means 100% for Britain to 100% done with Britain. Okay, and it came in large part from Thomas Paine's common sense. And again, the reason, it's italicized is because we're talking about the title of the book. Not a dumbed down rant for the masses is often described. Common sense is a masterful piece of argument and rhetoric that proved the power of words. Quote, some time past, the idea of independence would have struck me with horror, wrote a Pennsylvanian. I now see no alternative. Can any virtuous and brave American hesitate one moment in their choice? So in other words, this guy is saying, I never would have thought about independence before, but the book has convinced me that I was wrong the whole time. This seminar will examine Paine's persuasive achievement and common sense. So we're going to look at the three main points of chapter 1. Paine wants to convince us that the laws of the British government are very confusing and that kings are given way too much power. Government should be simple, designed by people working together with laws that are designed to keep society safe and strong. 18th century Parliament, that's 1700s, the British government, where the laws are made, is divided into three sections. The first is the king or monarch, who is the supreme ruler over the land. The second level of government is the House of Lords, the gentry or aristocracy. When you see about these groups, these are the highest class in like a social class system, very wealthy, very highly educated, very elite. They are appointed, very wealthy, and own a great percentage of the nation's property. A majority of their wealth has been passed down from generation to generation. The third body is the House of Commons. And the fact that we see the word commons here tells us a lot that we're talking about regular people. This level represents the rest of the citizens and is supposed to work somewhat like a democracy. Each section is believed to keep an eye on the other two. However, Paine argues that because power in two of the three branches is passed down from one generation to the next, how could this system possibly work? So hereditary succession is the idea that if my dad was king, or if my dad was in the House of Lords, I automatically get that position because of my family status. And this is much more common to discuss with the king, because you could have a king that was in power for 50 years, passes it down to his son, maybe another 50 years, passes it down to his son. So you could have the same family in power for well over 100 years, okay? Paine says the current system only pretends to represent its citizens, but does not. It is a tangled system of haves and have-nots, and that the king truly has all the power. Paine argues that government shouldn't have any power unless it is given to them by the people. And the only way that works is when every single position in power is voted upon by citizens. Like members of parliament would be voted by citizens, and the king would be voted by citizens. Or like in our country, we have the president and the House and the Senate, which the last two are in Congress. Chapter 2. Paine says that many of the differences that occur between people happen naturally. For example, some people become rich, some become poor. Some can be weaker and become exploited, which means controlled or taken advantage of, while others can become greedy. But if humankind entered this world as equals, how is it that there are privileged people who remain privileged from generation to generation? How did kings rise above everyone else? Why does governing power continue from father to son, which again, hereditary succession? Paine argues that hereditary succession does not happen naturally, but rose from wrongdoings. So, like, for example, he talks about 3 ways that you can get chosen to be king. One is a random choice from a group of people, like a lot system, like choosing straws from a hat. 2 is there's an election. Or 3, what's called usurpation, which means someone invades the country, uses military force, and drives the king out of power, and then replaces the king with themselves. And because he's used power and force and a military, no one's really going to threaten them to, lose that position as king unless someone else comes in and invades. So a lot of times when it says, but rose from wrongdoings in the current situation, it means that kings are often becoming king for the wrong reasons, not the right reasons. Okay. Chapter 3. Paine tries to convince the colonists that it is ridiculous for an island to govern a continent. Okay. Britain is an island. If you look at a map, it is an island in the northern part of Europe. And what it's ruling is essentially an area probably 15 to 20 times its size, if not more. And it's talking about a continent, North America. Because a lot of North America is controlled by the British right now, especially an island that is 3,000 miles away. And I come back to this time and time again. The distance between the mother country and the colonies is a huge part of this, that disconnect. Not only that, but the present government treats its American colonies cruelly. It is hurting commerce, which is like business, trade, between the colonies and the rest of the world, and has every intention of restricting the freedom of America even further through more taxes and direct rule. Moreover, the recent violence has shown that the king really does not care for the citizens of America, and he does not deserve their loyalty anymore. So if you think about recent violence, that could be Boston Massacre, 1770, which is a topic that a lot of you did for your Jamboard. Opportunities for great change occur rarely, and Paine wants to convince the colonists that the present time is perfect to declare independence. Otherwise, the opportunity is lost forever. Think about it. There's a growing number of people that are irritated with Britain. We've had a situation where we've had bloodshed on a battlefield already by the time this is written in 1776. We've had the war started. George Washington's already been chosen as the commander of the Continental Army. So it's not as if it's just been peaceful and then boom, all of a sudden people want to declare independence. It's been a process. It's been like a domino effect, one thing after another. And finally, chapter 4. Paine wants to convince the colonists they can win a war for independence. Although Britain has the strongest army in the world, Paine argues that England has a unique series of challenges. For example, much of the British Navy is spread out all across the globe, so only a small percentage of ships can be used to bring over troops and supplies. The reason why it's all over the world is because they're protecting all the other land that they've claimed all over the world. In addition, fighting a war 3,000 miles from home would be extremely difficult for the king to manage. Furthermore, America is rich in resources and manpower to fuel their own war machine. All right. And Paine kind of hints at the fact that you can't win your independence without a conflict. It's not as if Britain's just going to say, well, good luck to you. We wish you the best. Next, America really does not have a quarrel with any other countries like Britain does. Declaring independence would immediately mend relationships with the rest of the world, which would result in greater commerce. The other thing that Paine doesn't really mention here is that could lead to alliances with other countries. And not to spoil anything, but the biggest reason why independence will be won in the end is because the colonies, or then the United States, aligns itself with France, which is Britain's biggest enemy. So it works. Without a declaration of independence, there is great risk that the rest of the world would only view America as an extremely unstable place. In other words, they're not going to take us seriously. So what are Paine's goals here? The biggest goal is that he's trying to convince people that are on the fence or loyalists, to the groups that were mentioned in yesterday's reading, to support this movement for independence. Because if you don't have people on board supporting this, it's not going to work. This isn't a situation where if 50% of the people support it and 50% don't, it's still going to work and be successful. No, you need everybody, because the more people you have supporting this, the stronger the case will be. Okay. So once you're done reviewing the text, you're going to go to the exit ticket for today and follow the instructions. Talk to you soon.